You should stream video games, like that.
I am terrible at every video game, so that would be a problem. But I also, fair enough. Should I be like, hey guys,
Literally, yeah.
today on biology class we're playing Monkey Island. Smash that like and subscribe button. Today's lesson's brought to you by Curiosity Stream. I think I could do this. I got this.
Sound like
You're like,
question mark embedded into your voice.
you're like, Wix, do you need to make a beautiful web page? Use Wix. See, I got this. Use offer code Orlando for 20% off and make your dream a reality today with Wix. How was that? Was that good? Do you feel advertised too?
I feel very advertised.
Wix, if you're listening, I want money. Okay. So here we go.
The luxury life. Where did you come from? I was busy playing chess and watching.
Do you have a better pencil? This one is really bad.
Yeah, hopefully. Okay. What's your circulatory system? What is it? What's it do? Why do we have one? What's it for? Sure, and can I say, you're instinctively like grabbing here, which, to be clear, where is your circulatory system?
Everywhere.
It's everywhere. And it needs to be everywhere in your body because it is responsible for moving blood. And blood carries stuff. In fact, it carries, somebody said oxygen, which is absolutely true, but not just oxygen. So we'll say the circulatory system moves materials around the body. Very small organisms, even very small multicellular animals, don't need a circulatory system. If you're small enough, the materials will move themselves around the body. Materials naturally want to spread out. They naturally move. But as you get bigger, materials can't move on their own fast enough. Does that make sense? If you breathed oxygen into your lungs and then just waited for that oxygen to spread out through your body, well, you'd die of brain damage too soon. So that's problematic. Your body's just too big. It's too complicated. So it moves materials around the body, carried in blood, moving through a series of blood vessels. And when I say blood vessels, what do I mean? What's a blood vessel?
This might be a bad comparison, but like the subway?
Yeah.
Has like the tunnel that goes
Yeah.
That would be the blood vessel.
Yeah.
The subway itself.
That's right. Listen, your blood vessels are just a series of tubes, right? Piping, right? If you picture your house, how many people have like an unfinished basement? Anyone have an unfinished basement in their house and you go in the basement, you look up and you can see all the plumbing, right? You can see, if you live in an older home, it's almost certainly copper piping all throughout for supply. If you live in a newer home, it might be done in cross-linked polyethylene PEX, right? The red and the blue plastic piping. And then, you probably have black plastic ABS piping for drainage, right? So all of your sewer drains and all of your vents are probably done in plastic ABS if your house is reasonably modern. If you have a really old house like mine, those your main plumbing might actually still be in cast iron. And have a big old cast iron vent stack in their basement that the plumbing moves into. I do. My house was built in 1954. And we've replaced most of the plumbing throughout the house with plastic, but the main stack's still cast iron. That's what your blood vessels are. They're just tubes that run all throughout your body that blood can flow in. And some of them are made to send blood to all the different parts of your body, and some of them are made to bring the blood back where it came from. All right, so let's talk about the parts of this. The first thing we're going to talk about is blood. And if the timing works out, we're actually going to have somebody come in this week. I guess not this week. It was supposed to be Friday. And do a little bit of work with blood. In fact, we're going to have my friend Chris come in, who is a nurse, and he was going to take my blood out. And we'd actually take a look at it. If you never given blood before, you just get a little needle. But I mean, it's not like the most pleasant thing in the world. But I don't know if we'll get to that now or not, because every day is kind of precious, but I'd like to, because we would actually, I did this a couple years ago, we actually take my blood out, and we look at it under a microscope, see what those cells look like. We turn it in a centrifuge and break it up into its parts and see what the different parts of the blood are, and we can actually see, you also can see me go like, because I'm a big baby and I don't like getting needles, but we can see blood both for what it is and what it's made of. And then we can also talk about why it's made that way, what it does. So talk to me, what is blood? We're all familiar with it on a basic level. It's a red liquid that comes out of our body if we get a cut. What is it?
It transfers oxygen around the body.
Okay, good. That's definitely one of its purposes. So let's start with that. Let's talk about what it does. And for sure, I would say its number one purpose is transportation. And what does it transport more than anything else? You already said it. Oxygen. What else does it transport, though? Oxygen's the biggie. It needs to do that constantly. Because without oxygen, our organs shut down, our brain would shut down, our muscles would shut down. Everything shuts down. But what else does it transport? Nutrients. Very good.
My daughter wanted to meet Big Rick Energy.
I want you to know that's being recorded right now. Live streamed, actually.
Oh, whoever's at home.
I'm on Twitch.
Wait, do you have online?
I suspect nobody is watching. But I live stream every day, just in case someone's at home. If you're ever at home.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Every lesson, every day. Do you ever wonder why I do this every day? It's not like for my health. It's.
Well, I thought you were recording lessons, but I didn't know you were like live.
Oh, yeah, that's like you could. In fact, I've had people who have visual impairments before who like just put an iPad or a laptop in front of them just so they can just like have it right there at eyesight. Anyway. Okay. Anyway. So oxygen, nutrients. And then what's the flip side of nutrients? Yeah. Yeah, I'm going to 100%. I'm going to put that under nutrients, but absolutely. In fact, that's the main one.
I don't know if I'm right, but iron?
Iron is very important. Iron is actually how it transports oxygen. We'll talk about that.
Okay.
So good. But listen, what's the flip side of nutrients? I mean, you know this. A part of nutrients for sure. But you take nutrients in, proteins, sugars, all these things. You metabolize them, you use them. Waste. It gets rid of waste. And I mean, that can be the carbon dioxide that our cells produce, but also nutrient waste, things of that nature. Yeah. Okay, so it moves things around. That's good. What else does your blood do? This is actually very important. Anybody? Defense. Defense. Your blood has cells that fight infection. White blood cells, absolutely. But not only do you have cells that fight infection, that was oddly hard to say, we also have cells designed to heal wounds. So, if you suffer an injury, your blood will move white blood cells to that location to attack any foreign entities that may be entering your bloodstream, which is important. But then it also has cells that are designed to heal that wound and close it up. Not the eventual replacement that will happen. Eventually new skin will grow, right? But before that happens, at a wound site, what forms?
Platelet.
Yeah, which forms what we would commonly call a scab, yeah.
How come some cells are liquid and some cells form liquid and then some form solids?
Good question. Every cell is a solid. It's just if they stick together and there's lots of them stuck together, then we see that as a solid. And in the case of, say, blood cells, they're just not stuck to each other. They're spread out, and between them, there's lots of liquid. But if we get around to drawing my blood and putting it in the centrifuge, when we do that, all of my red blood cells will collapse in the bottom, and it'll just look like a thick, solid, gooey paste. Like it'll just be the solid cellular material. Great question, by the way. Very good question. What else does your blood do? These are two big ones, but you know the third one. I used to busk in the winter.
What's that? What's buzz?
I used to go outside the liquor store with a guitar and sing and put a guitar case out and people would give me money. It was a good gig. I'd make good money.
You did?
Oh yeah.
You're not being ironic, right?
No. Oh, you could do great. You could make a few $100 in a day.
$300.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, let's all make a band.
Yeah, listen. No, busking was a good gig. I liked it. I don't do it now because I'm lazy. And oddly, I get as I get older, I get increasingly more self-conscious, which is probably a bad sign of my mental health. But anyway, that's a different discussion. Regardless, those winter months busking can be tough. Because you're trying to play guitar and it's cold out there. What's going on?
I don't know. I think your blood cells are say your blood cells from your hands are moving closer to the the main body so that it can survive and stay warmer.
Hey! Fantastic. See, your hands get real cold if you're out in the cold because your blood, which collects heat from anytime your muscles move, your brain works, anything doing work makes heat, your blood picks up that heat and then it moves it around the body. And normally it tries to spread it out. On hot summer days, the blood flows a lot to your skin so that it can bleed that heat off into the air. On cold winter days, your blood gets as far away from your extremities as it can and into your core body so that it can keep your core body warm. The result of which is your fingers not only get cold, but they also get less blood flow, so they get less nimble. There's less muscle action. They get weak. All of a sudden, fretting those cords feels hard and moving fast feels hard. Yeah.
How colds are more common in the winter. That's because in the winter, since it's so cold, your body's working on more your temperature than it is on fighting infections.
That's the other thing. Absolutely. You have less blood flow to the extremities and to potential entry sites for infection. And as a result, you have less defense against disease. Absolutely. So temperature regulation is another major part of blood. I'm not even going to write anything about that. But it's not just humans that do that. Where does your dog send a lot of blood flow to lose heat on hot days? You know this. Tongue. Your dog's tongue is highly vascularized, and that's how they've evolved to lose heat. A dog can't sweat. So you send lots of blood flow to the skin, and then you sweat. And as you sweat, as long as it's not too humid out, the sweat evaporates, and evaporation requires heat. And where does it get that heat? From your blood, which is flowing near it, and it cools your blood down. A dog can't sweat, covered in fur. Doesn't help it. So what it does, it wags its tongue in the air, and the water evaporates off its tongue, and it has to get heat to do that, and it gets it from its blood. You know what a toucan does? When it wants to cool down, it sends tons of blood into its beak, and that will wave it in the air and just let air flow across it and lose heat. And then if it's cooler out and it wants to warm up, it sends less blood to the beak, and if it really wants to stay warm, it'll send no blood to the beak. It uses its big beak as a big radiator, right? Just like the radiator in your car that helps maintain your proper engine temperature, right? So just like you have liquid moving through your engine that when we need the engine to warm up, we restrict flow to the radiator and the hot water stays in the engine and keeps the engine hot. And we need to cool the engine down. We run that through the radiator that air can blow across and cool the engine down. And that's how your car maintains a constant temperature. What's the last thing your blood does? Well, we mentioned this yesterday, but what's the main way your brain sends signals to the body? How does your brain send signal? Like if I want to move my arm, my brain sends a signal and it sends it in?
Spine.
Down the spine, and the spine is full of what kind of cells? Nerves. And then they branch off and there's a nerve ending at my muscle and it says, hey, muscle, flex. And listen, my muscles are complying. You know that. Yeah, first thing people notice. But listen, is that the only way your brain sends messages? See, when your brain sends a message that way, it has to send it to a specific place. What if your brain just wants to tell the whole body, hey, we're about to do hard work. You better start getting ready for energy before a race. Maybe, something scary happens. Or maybe just you're stressed and anxious and you feel this way all the time. But how's your body send that message? Does it send messages down every single nerve to every single muscle in place? Wouldn't it be nice to have a way to send a message to the entire body all at once? How could you do that? You could put it in your blood. What do we call those? Yeah? What do we call those? Hormones. A hormone is a chemical signal. A hormone is a chemical signal produced somewhere, usually in one of the glands of the brain, the pituitary gland, which the pituitary gland is basically in the dead middle of your head. It's about this big, little tiny thing, and it produces all kinds of hormones. And what it does, it makes a little chemical, and it puts this chemical into your blood. And then every cell in your body is designed that when it sees these chemicals to respond the same way. So, for example, you have a hormone called epinephrine, also known as adrenaline. What signal does that send to every cell in your body? Adrenaline?
You keep going, right?
Yeah, it's called the fight or flight response. Adrenaline basically means it tells all of your cells you're about to have to be active. So you know that feeling? Maybe it's when you're watching a horror movie, or maybe it's when you're playing a sport and you're getting fired up, or when you're exercising you're getting fired up, or maybe if somebody's just scared you or you're on a roller coaster. You know that feeling where all of a sudden your body just feels like, ugh, right? Like I'm about to go. That feeling is adrenaline entering your bloodstream.
Is there a reason that why after, let's say you get startled, you feel that in your body and then you don't act on it kind of thing? It feels so bad, right?
Yeah, okay, great question. If you then don't act on it, you've told all of your muscles in your body to do a whole bunch of stuff. So what they start immediately doing when they see that is they start burning sugar to produce more energy. They're filling themselves up with energy. And then to replenish that sugar, they're sending messages off to the places where long-term storage of energy is held and saying, hey, turn that into sugar and put it into the bloodstream. So now your blood sugar is spiking. And this is all predicated on the assumption that you're about to do something. And now if you don't do something, all of a sudden your body's like, what? Like what's, it's not set up to do what you're about to do. That system is designed to result in action, which means when you do that, like run around the block or something, you'll feel better. Seriously, because you got to work that energy off. When you're feeling anxious like that, when you're feeling highly tense, go do something physical. That's what your body thinks it needs to do. So do it, because otherwise it's going to use that energy to make you go like, for the next 2 hours. Maybe you know that feeling, being like, oh my God. And the problem is your body doesn't know the difference. So maybe what you have in front of you is an English paper you haven't done in 4 days, right? And all of a sudden you start getting a little stressed. Well, stress, your little lizard brain back there is like, stress, oh no, there must be some kind of animal chasing us. And it's like adrenaline. And now you're sitting in front of a computer, you've got an English paper to write, and your body's screaming like, oh God, tense every muscle, go, right? Which is not actually highly conducive to writing an English paper. Go for a walk. Or go for a run. Or go lift something heavy. I don't know. Just do something. Play with your dog.
Chase down your neighbors.
Play with your cat. Yeah.
Can't the adrenaline, it's worse with ADHD.
Yeah.
Like they're always doing that and they're always pumping adrenaline.
Yeah, that's right. And listen, adrenaline's one of many hormones.
Please excuse this interruption. This is for staff and students. We do have an iPhone 13 Pro Max missing with a blue case and a
Hey guys, shut up.
So if anyone has that or knows the whereabouts of this phone, could you please contact the office immediately? Thank you.
I stole it.
And so listen, adrenaline is just one example, but hormones are used to regulate everything that your body is doing, that your body needs to have all the cells doing the same thing. Norepinephrine or noradrenaline actually has the opposite response. It's a calming, soothing drug. Dopamine is a soothing hormone. You have human growth hormone, which is released during puberty that tells your body to not just make enough cells to kind of maintain its current size, but actually to grow and to get bigger. People will take that hormone artificially so that they can get bigger, stronger muscles playing sports. Don't do that, by the way. It's very bad for your endocrine system. What you should do is exercise if you want to do that. Yeah. So your blood is responsible for sending messages throughout the whole body. All right. Follow-up question. What is blood? Sure. Is that all it is? Okay. What else? Ah, you guys are good. By the way, I feel like I'm talking over top of two other conversations, and that's not working for me. Or you, because that's not a good way to learn. So, quiet. All right, plasma. What is plasma? Because this is about 50 to 55% of blood by weight. And it is the
Base.
Sorry?
Base.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the liquid portion of blood. It's basically water, but it's not just water. So your blood liquid is water, but it's water with all kinds of stuff dissolved in it. By the way, including hormones. Hormones aren't in the blood cells, they just are in the blood plasma. They're just in the liquid. When there is sugar in the blood, the sugar just is in the plasma. When, all the drugs and things that we take, if you take aspirin, that's going to end up metabolized in your blood, in the plasma. What else would be there? Most of the nutrients. Some nutrients are carried in blood cells. Most of them are not. Most of them are just carried in the blood plasma. So it is a liquid portion. Has anyone, you've seen plasma. Have you ever you've been cut and a scab is starting to form? And when the scab forms over top of your wound, when it is still forming, it will get to a point, a scab is just a meshy network of platelets that stop blood cells from being able to get out and blood plasma from getting out. But that mesh will stop cells before it will stop plasma. While that scab is still forming, you'll have a portion where blood cells can't get out. Yes?
Could you send Sophia Orne to the office, please?
Yes, I will. Now that one I heard. See you, Orme. So you've experienced this. You ever had a scab and you can't see red blood coming out of it, but there is still liquid coming out of it? Right? That kind of goopy, yellowy, white kind of liquid?
Yeah.
That is your blood. It's just that the liquid...
Are you?
I'm being angry right now. Quiet. Shh. Shh. Quiet. Don't interrupt me while I'm being full of rage. Quiet down. You. Quiet down. All right. So, blood plasma is the liquid portion. It makes up, like we said, about 50 to 55% of the blood by mass, and in fact by volume if you spin it down. The rest of it is made of cells, which obviously then would be somewhere between 45 and 50%. So we'll talk about each of these in turn. First, we'll talk about the blood plasma. By the way, plasma is a word we use all the time in biology to refer to the liquid portion of something. The cytoplasm is the liquid in the cell. Cyto meaning cell, plasma meaning liquid. The nucleoplasm is the liquid inside the nucleus. Well, here the blood plasma is the liquid portion of blood. It's a water-based solution. Carries most nutrients and hormones. But mainly, what is the important thing about having a liquid in your blood? What's its primary purpose? Don't overthink it.
To travel fast and carry things.
Yeah, lets it flow. Does that make sense? If your blood was a solid, it wouldn't move very well through your body, would it? Right? It would have to what? I guess all those cells would have to have like legs or something, or like it, right? You think about it. The most important function of plasma is that it allows blood to flow.
Isn't lightning also made out of plasma? Is that
An entirely different word. It's the same word, an entirely different meaning. Okay. So that is actually talking about a state of matter where things are so hot that they become ionized. Okay. Yeah, and entirely. Yet another case in science of us using the same word to mean two totally different things. Very stupid. Spelling is hard. I struggle to spell. I don't try to be nice. I have no interest in being nice. It doesn't appeal to me. Cells. Blood cells can be generally or broadly called hemocytes. This is worth knowing. If you see the prefix heme, or from its Latin root, it actually usually has an A in front of it. That means blood. And we've already said that if you see cyte as an ending, that means cytoplasm is the liquid in the cell. Osteocytes are bone cells. Chondrocytes are cartilage cells. Cyte means cell. Good. So hemocytes are blood cells. What are the three types of blood cells? There's three categories of blood cells. This is where we're going to leave off today. So we're good. We're going to be done with time to spare. Yep. Hemoglobin. So heme again means blood. Hemoglobin we're about to talk about in like 35 seconds. It is a molecule in the blood that's very important. A globulus, this big chunky molecule, and it's what's actually responsible for carrying oxygen, which is found in what type of blood cell? What blood cells carry oxygen? Red cell. Very good.
Is it hemoglobin what makes blood red?
Correct. Very good. So the first we're going to learn about are called erythrocytes. Also commonly called red blood cells. So erythrocytes, red blood cells, are by far the most common blood cell. It's not even any comparison to any other type of cell. They are by far the most common. If you look at blood under a microscope, you probably will not notice any other cells other than red blood cells. They are just profoundly more common than anything else. Does anyone know what they look like?
They're red.
Yes. Yeah. They're kind of donut shaped. Well, they don't have the hole in the middle, but what they do have is a depression in the middle. They kind of, if you look at them from the top, settle down. If you look at them from the top, they kind of look like this, where there's almost like two distinct rings, and then this would all be filled in. And this is also filled in. So, you know, unlike a donut, it doesn't have a hole in the middle. But the reason it looks like that is if you look at it from the side, it actually looks kind of like that. It is depressed in the middle. Yeah. So this would be kind of a top view, and that would be kind of a side view. Their main purpose is to carry oxygen. Sorry? All right, and like we said, actually, what allows them to carry oxygen is the molecule hemoglobin. And you'll see this spelled, the British spell it with that leading A again. We tend to spell it just with the E, Hemoglobin, hemoglobin. And hemoglobin binds oxygen. On 4 iron atom binding sites. So, when you talk about blood iron, this is important to know. You do not have iron freely floating around in your blood. Does that make sense? Your blood absolutely has tremendous amounts of iron in it, but that iron is inside of your blood cells, bound to a molecule called hemoglobin. Now, having said that, your blood has a lot of iron in it, because every single oxygen molecule has to bind to an iron atom. And your blood has to carry a lot of oxygen, yeah.
Could you scroll just so we can talk about that?
Yes, I'm sorry. How's that?
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. Has anyone ever had their iron checked before?
Yeah.
You have? What do they do?
I don't remember.
No worries. They have a little machine, and the machine actually shines light through your blood, and they shine a wavelength of light that iron absorbs, and they can use that to see how much iron's in your blood. When I gave blood in Haiti, they didn't have this machine. You know what they do to check your iron there? No.
Do they have a magnet?
No.
Oh.
Which you could do. They actually take your blood, and so before they do the big blood draw, they just do a little finger prick, and they get a little bit of your blood, and they squeeze a few drops out, and they squeeze it into a test tube with some water in it, and a saline solution, and it's a saline solution that's calibrated. Blood that has lots of iron in it, iron's a heavy atom, much heavier than the carbon atoms and everything else that make up the rest of your blood, and so blood with lots of iron is heavy, and blood with low iron is lighter. And so they make a saline solution that is calibrated, so when they drop blood in it, if it's got enough iron in it, it sinks. And if you're low on iron, it floats to the top. Isn't that clever? And so in a place that can't afford expensive machinery, they can just mix a bit of salt and water together and use that to calibrate whether or not your blood has enough iron. I'll tell you something else about when I gave blood in Haiti. I give blood here. I have to give blood. I have hypertension, And the reason I have hypertension is I have a diseased liver that produces too much iron. And so my blood volume is just too thick, too heavy. My blood is really iron rich. And the result of that is it's thicker and sludgier than normal blood, which is hard on your heart, so it gives you hypertension. And the way you treat that is you just give blood regularly, because then your body just replenishes that with liquid and it thins my blood out. And as long as I do that, I don't have to take blood thinners or anything. So I do this regularly. So I give blood here all the time. Every 3 weeks. Every 3 weeks I go and I give blood. And it's great because I'm donating blood, which people, somebody's in an accident, they need it. So it's a win for them. I'm making it easier on my heart, which is good for me because I can stick around a little longer, and that's nice. But here, I go get blood and they give you a needle and they take your blood and you chat with the lady, and then afterwards they give you a juice box and a bag of pretzels and you're like, this is nice, and you leave. Great. There, sit down, they test my blood, I'm like, oh, that's different, cool. And then, the lady pulled the needle out, and I swear to God, it was like the size of like those sink faucets.
Ew.
It was just this enormous friggin' needle. And it was funny because my wife was there, and she saw the look on my eyes, so she pulled the camera out and filmed me. I wonder if I still have the footage. I'll see if I can find it. Because there's a video footage of me going, and the lady's like, problem? They speak Haitian Creole and they speak French. So I was speaking a little bit of French. I was like, oh, problem. It's like, okay. And so there's this video footage of her bringing this needle and me going like, because honest to God, it was like the biggest friggin' needle I've ever seen in my life. And even my wife, who works in a hospital, she's like, Joe, that's honest to God bigger than the needle they used to give like an epidural, like a spinal tap. I was like, yeah, oh great. Well, I'm glad to hear it. Anyway, it's terrifying. I'm not good with needles. I'm a bit of a baby. And it's not the pain. It's not the pain, it's not the blood. It's the creepy factor. Is anyone else like this? You get a needle and you're like, oh, that's in my vein right now. Right? Weirds me out. Weirds me out. Yeah.
You said you have hypertension.
Yeah.
Can that cause you to have like clogged arteries in your heart?
It's the other way around. So having clogged arteries will make your blood pressure go up. Though what hypertension can do is it can make not clogged arteries, but it can result in a stiffening of the arteries. We'll learn about this when we talk about arteries. They're normally elastic. So when your heart beats, they kind of stretch out. And when your heart relaxes, they stretch down a bit. And if you're pushing them too hard all the time, no different than imagine an elastic band that you're constantly pulling on really hard. It can eventually just start to stiffen up and to not be as elastic, and that's problematic. Yeah.
When you were telling the story about Haiti, I thought it was going to be like, the thing where they take like the hot piece of metal in the blood. That's what I thought of.
Oh, well, similar. Thing is so good. Have you guys seen The Thing? I think The Thing has, back me up on this, the grossest special effects of any movie that's ever been made.
Fire 2, pizza.
Okay, fair enough. I've seen that too, that's true. But seriously, it's pretty intense. Pretty good. Anyway, the dog. Anyway. As a dog lover, I don't care for that. Okay, so listen. Shh. That is the main purpose of red blood cells. Now there's something to note. They have what we call protein markers called antigens on their outer surface. We're not going to talk about this too much today, but this determines your blood type, what type of protein markers you have on the outside of your cell. So part of the way your body determines whether blood that is in your blood vessels is your blood, which is good, or somebody else's blood, which is bad, is by checking to see what antigen markers it has on the outside. And they literally are just like these big long chains of protein that stick up off the cell membrane that basically serve as flags. Does anyone here know their blood type? I'm type B positive, which I like to think is like a memo to me in life. Okay, Orlando, B positive. Don't you think? That's how I remember it. Because I couldn't be blood type, you go to hell. Right? So it had to be B blood type, you be positive. See? Isn't that good? Positive.
I saw this joke thing, and some guy was in the hospital. He had they asked him if he knew his blood type, and he said B positive, and they're like, I'm trying, but we're trying to save your life.
That's funny. I like it. Does anyone else know their blood type? It's okay. If you give blood, they'll tell you. You have to be. You ask.
I did, and they're like, we don't know. And I'm like,
Oh, really?
okay.
Oh, interesting. But like if you give repeatedly, because the first time you give, they probably don't know. But if you have like the app on file and you keep in there, then they look you up the next time you're there. And they have to test your blood when you donate it for obvious reasons. They want to make sure you're not diseased. Sorry? You don't need an app, but you can get the app. And then you can book your appointments online and it reminds you and all that. You have to be, 16 to give blood?
I think it's a little bit younger.
Is it 15? Whatever. Anyway, as soon as you can, you should all give blood. It's very important. And there was a serious drop-off in COVID times in the number of people giving blood. I think because people were nervous. But ironically, there's never been more need. And they have serious shortages of blood supplies, which is a real problem. And the last thing in the world you want is to need surgery because of some accident and they don't have blood on hand because you could die. So give blood. Give blood often. Give blood regularly. It's safe. And it's a good deed. Do it. Yeah.
Theoretically, if you had all like the components of blood, couldn't you make artificial blood?
Yeah, there is artificial blood. But it is not nearly as effective as the real thing. What's another type of blood cell? Very good. We call these leukocytes.
Is this for leukemia?
Yep. Yeah, leukemia is cancer of the white blood cells.
Don't slap that. Raise your hand.
Okay, leukocytes are also more commonly known as white blood cells. That, by the way, is because leuka is, I want to say Latin, could be Greek. Somebody check. Usually I know, I can't actually remember this time. But for white. So if you were a Latin or a Greek speaker, this would just mean white cells, but leukocytes. These are much bigger than red blood cells. But there's way fewer of them. And they travel through the body in search of foreign objects. All right, so if you can imagine, if you've got a blood vessel here, whoa, and you have a mean old virus poking around, maybe a SARS-CoV-2 virus, that thing can go right away. So we've got a mean old virus around. Well, our white blood cells move through our blood vessel in search of that, and they will destroy it. And the most common way they do is by a process called endocytosis, where they actually engulf.
Endocytosis?
Yep.
Oh, I remember that. Is it the envelop? I don't know, like this.
Great.
I don't know. You didn't get the question.
That's why you don't do this.
Endocytosis is related to the process of endosymbiosis, which was like how the nucleus formed, right? By moving one cell inside the other. What your white blood cells will do is they will, actually engulf another cell. But if all goes according to plan, they don't then have that continue growing inside of them. They will destroy it. So they'll engulf that virus, and then they will destroy it, and then typically destroy themselves as well, to make sure that the viral material is gone. That's right. Knowing if anyone has any cancer patients in their lives who have had to undergo chemotherapy, chemotherapy damages your white blood cells, and so they will frequently have white cell or T cell counts done to make sure they have sufficient white blood cells in their blood to keep them healthy. If anyone has an immunodeficiency virus, say most commonly AIDS, they have to constantly watch their white blood cell counts, their T cell counts. Shh. Thank you. So if you ever hear somebody talking about their T cell count, killer T cells are one of the main types of white blood cells that are involved in defense. Yeah.
Is that what blood transfusions?
Yeah. To replenish, I mean, you get a blood transfusion to replenish all of it. So whatever, guys, if you're finding something about this so amusing that you really can't handle yourselves, go for a walk or something, all right? Yeah, so if you have any type of cell in your blood that is deficient, then a transfusion can replenish that, right? Most often that's just related to red blood cells, but it could be white blood cells. I have one of my mom's best friends had bone marrow cancer, which until about 6 or 7 years ago was a death sentence. I mean, it was completely untreatable. In her case, she was actually able to get a donor, but they had to, because your bone marrow produces your blood cells, which we'll mention in a minute, they had to not only cut out the portion of bone marrow that was damaged and replace it with a donor, in this case her brother, but they had to completely transfuse her blood, i.e. they took all of her blood out and replaced it with donated blood, which is crazy, like every single drop. And so it's really crazy. This is, I think, the craziest story of all. Because her bone marrow was transplanted and then she got a blood transfusion, her blood, she has 2 blood types, which is to say she has a section of bone marrow that produces a different type of blood, a compatible one, which is safe, but a different type of blood than the rest of her body, which is crazy. And again, is just an example of like how far we've come in terms of medical technology. We live in amazing times. I see 2 hands. Yeah?
Did they like transfer it out like slowly, or did they like
Yeah.
it all out?
Yeah, no. So it's just a dialysis, a transfusion machine. But and if anyone does anyone have anyone in their life who has to go through kidney dialysis? That is a similar thing, which is the bringing blood outside of the body for filtration. So normally your kidneys are responsible for blood filtration in your body. And for people whose kidneys aren't functioning properly, they have reduced renal function, they can have dialysis where they actually bring the blood outside of the body and use a machine to filter it. So, I mean, again, we live in amazing times. Yeah.
Was the other type of blood O negative? Is that, it's like
It is universally compatible. I don't know if it was or not, but it was her brother who donated his marrow. And in that case, there's lots of concerns for compatibility. So I'll ask her actually. But we'll talk about that. Anyway, what is the 3rd type of blood cell? You probably know this word. Very good. Platelets.
So small. Exactly.
These are very small cells, smaller than red blood cells, but they're responsible for clotting. So at injury sites, the V is for very. Sorry about that. So at injury sites, platelets form a mesh that eventually forms a solid mass over the wound. And this prevents blood loss until new tissues can form, like until new skin cells or new muscle cells, whatever the case may be. Prevents blood loss until new tissues can form. Yeah.
Isn't there a condition where, like, say if you get an injury, of a person's blood will not clot?
Yeah. In fact, we learned about one that is actually a genetic disease that results in that called hemophilia. Anyone remember that? One of you did that for your genetic disorder project, which I should be returning tonight, by the way. And the hemophilia is interesting because it's a sex-linked disease. Sex-linked meaning that it was found on the X chromosome, which means that men are much more frequently affected with hemophilia than are women. That looks nicer. Yeah, we have time.
Oh my god, if I lose this, I'm gonna cry. I will actually bawl my eyes out.
Does he have extra?
Oh.
Yeah, I swear.
I'll invest in it.
And then it happened. Yeah. When it happens, like when it happens,
Administrator be like, hey,
All right. This is this is my centrifuge. I have a nice. This is a nice piece of laboratory equipment, actually. This is a microcentrifuge, which means it takes small little microtubes. They can be a little bit bigger than this, but it'll take these ones too. And you put them in here, and then what's this do? Yeah, it just spins real fast. The highly scientific process of spinning real fast. And when you spin a liquid with solids suspended in it real fast, oh, that's there we go.
no, not you.
It's real fast. Don't worry, the lid won't open when it's running. Unless you pull the little harder, then it will. The thing goes real fast, all right? It spins, spins, spins. And if you put blood in there and spin it for 20 minutes, eventually, what's going to happen to all the heavy solids in the blood? Yeah, they're going to get pushed out, right? Centrifugal force, centripetal force. Sorry, last Chuck. Have you guys done centripetal force yet? Good, then I'll shut up. But it'll push all the heavy stuff out and down, and the lighter stuff will come to the top. So if you take blood and you spin it down, which we may do if time permits, I think it's a neat activity, but you could then take one of these out. Oh, I just pushed it. Let's hide the evidence. You could then take one of them out, and it would have it sorted by weight. If you were to do that, if you were to take a test tube, this is my test tube. Hi. Made me uncomfortable.
Sorry. I was gonna yell
Yo.
at you or something.
Oh, what did I do?
No, not. Okay,
Continuing to be uncomfortable. All right, so if I had a test tube of blood and I put it in the centrifuge, oh God, do I have to draw a centrifuge now? Don't tell me what to do.
You said that's what it looks like.
See, no, it looks like it's spinning.
Ready?
Who said it was not?
Yeah.
No.
It kind of looks like a radio.
Let's be UFOs.
Oh wait, no.
Looks like a washing machine.
Is this true?
You think I took art? Look at this right now.
Yeah, but you've like constantly been drawing for the last.
Constantly, every waking minute. So if I take blood and I put it through a centrifuge, I can actually get it to be separated into its individual parts. And we said, what makes up the biggest portion of blood?
Blood cells.
Blood cells. Do they take up most space?
Oh, it's plasma.
Yeah. So actually, if you spin blood down, the majority of it is going to be plasma. Is the plasma going to be the portion at the top or the bottom? Do you think it's the heavy part or the light part? Yeah, you're right. Very good. So if you spin blood down, you get this kind of light yellow liquid forming at the top, and that's the plasma. You could then, if you wanted to test somebody's blood sugar, or if you wanted to test for the presence of a drug or something like that, that is the portion of the blood you would test, the liquid. Then this will all be cells. What is the overwhelming majority of the cellular matter? Is most of this going to be white or most of this going to be red?
Excuse the interruption.
In fact,
Attention staff, please meet in the front foyer at the bell to have a picture taken to show support for the education workers. We've been challenged to see if we have greater participation than other schools, so please join us at 2:10. Thank you.
Please do.
Here, I was told I looked like a student teacher
I could see that.
because of like my outfit today. Because hashtag we look the same.
I like that. And you have so few platelets in your general blood circulation that they don't show up at all. But you can actually see a very fine layer of white blood cells between. So again, this was the plan for Friday. If we don't end up being here Friday, maybe we'll do this, maybe we won't. I'll see if my wife can come in a different day, if my buddy Chris can't and take my blood. Is that a conflict of interest? If my wife takes my blood? When my wife was a midwifery student, one day I was coaching volleyball, as we previously discussed, and I got a text from my wife saying, "Hey, hun, what would you like for dinner? Let me tell you something about being married." The alarms immediately went off. Why is she being so nice to me? Right? So I said, whatever. And then she said, "Oh, I thought I might pick up some beer at the beer store. Would you like something?" And again, now the siren is flashing at high intensity. Why is she being so nice? So I said, whatever, is fine. Then she said, "Can I give you an IV? Because the last two I did really went badly." So I said, "I guess." So she did. She gave me an IV. And then she gave me like 4 more. And she was pretty good. And then, and this was neat, I said, "You know, Britt, one of the ways we learn how to do something is by teaching someone else to do it." So she actually taught me how to give her an IV. So I've actually given somebody an IV before, and I'll tell you, it's creepy. Yeah.
So I have a question about Friday, right?
Yeah.
So if we don't show up, will we get rushed absent?
So guys, listen, you will almost certainly receive clear communication today, but your parents and you should have received an email yesterday from the school. God, there are so many emails here. Anyway, you will receive a communication about Friday, and